All right, so we got a problem here. First, I'm way over here. Second, target's way over there. That's a problem, and we're going to fix it. First thing we're going to do, we're going to take our power leg, which is going to be our back one, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a hyper kick, and we're going to go into space-time right here. So what we're going to do is with a strong pull with our hip flexors and a little bit of hippity-skippity, we're going to... Yeah. What's going on, everyone? Matic here, and today's episode is a continuation of the 5 principles of fighting: distance, footwork, guard, techniques, and strategy. And for today's video, we're mostly going over distance. Now, distance is one of the most important of the 5 principles because distance determines what footwork or what type of footwork you might use to change your distance, what kind of guard you might have at certain distances, what techniques are possible at closer or further distances, and also what strategies you might need in order to change those distances, or what your opponent's distance might be for you to then counter them. So when we're fighting, there are 2 distances that we primarily have to pay attention to. One of them is your own personal distance, and that is determined by usually how long your limbs are, your arms and legs, and what your physical ability is to close or open distances at certain speeds with certain footworks and stuff. The second type of distance is much harder to train, and that is the distance of your opponent. Different opponents will have different fighting distances depending on either what they like to use when they fight, or just if they are much taller than you, they will have a further distance than you. If they are smaller, they will be closer. So different things and different people will determine what your opponent's fighting distance is compared to yours. So since the second one is primarily determined through sparring and training and stuff like that, our own personal solo training will mostly be geared towards figuring out what our distance is and learning on how to figure out what your fighting distance is off the spot without having to do dumb, basic rookie things to figure out your distance is very important and should be one of the highest priorities when it comes to fighting. For those who might be wondering like what I kind of mean by like very basic rookie things, we're going to use boxing as the main example. Most people will say that in order to judge or determine your distance is you use your jab. And the theory behind this is, and it is technically correct, that if you can touch them with your jab, and this is touch, right, not putting power into it, if you can touch with your jab, then you can put power into your backhand. This is true. However, everybody does it. And technically the way that like scoring and stuff is done within boxing or other similar scoring systems to boxing, whereas kickboxing and like all that stuff, this checking of distance, or maybe even just like making your opponent be aware of, hey, there's a hand, this counts towards your scoring. So people will do this. The problem with this is if you are lazy with it, your opponent can and should capitalize on it. And this is kind of where the difference is between with karate and somewhat similar things is when we put a technique out, it serves a purpose, a deliberate purpose. And it's usually that if I'm going to throw a jab, my jab is either to land with my jab with good power and stuff like that, or is to help set up something else, right? Set up something else. I'm not using it to check a distance because, again, kicks are involved. So if I can touch you with my hands, you can touch me with your feet. Low kicks and stuff like that, right? So this is kind of something we have to be aware of. So me learning how long my limbs are and how long I can stretch them out without having to do basic rookie things that can be dangerous for me, the sooner the better. So training wise, I'll show you one when you're with a partner that's kind of simple to do. There is variation depending on sizes and heights of your partner. So one thing that you can do is if you are set up in front of a partner, hands out with it. Usually it works with this type of guard. I've gone over it like in one of my first videos. It doesn't work so much with anything that's higher. But with this type of setup, so let's say a right angle with my arm and my fist pointed at my opponent's chin, you should be far or close enough to where if you just open your hands, both of you, your fingers are kind of close to touching. They shouldn't overlap and they shouldn't be way out here. They should be like kind of close. So that's with a partner. And what you can do is you can do this and then go to whatever normal guard you have. By doing that type of check, you should somewhere be around the same area as if when you do your solo. So a quick and easy way to figure out your solo distance. So in order to figure out our solo training distance, you will stand in front of your target and all you're going to do is a basic front kick. You're not going to do a thrust kick. You're not going to do a teep or anything like that. Just nice, easy, basic front kick. and you should either just barely touch or just barely miss. Either one of those. The reason is because from there, if I can barely or just almost touch with my front kick, when I then go into a round kick, I can put some power into it. Or from here, because all you do is just take a step back into whatever stance you have. So I can't really lean or anything, I can't touch them, but the same should apply to them. But I can do a simple push, and I can get my front hand with fairly decent power, right? Or I can use my backhand and still get pretty decent power. Now, for me personally, my personal training, I actually try to be roughly about 1 meter or one of these squares away from my target. So that's technically about here. So that's a little bit further, but that's usually because unfortunately when I would do tournaments and stuff, I usually wound up being the shorter one. So I had to kind of learn to go further and have a longer distance for my technique, which is good for me because it taught me on how to close distance quickly and be more deceiving in my techniques. So that's on how to figure out our distance. Now we need to figure out what our actual distances are and what they are for. And for that, we have 4 different zones. We have our safe zone, our busy zone, working zone, and last, let's go zone. So where exactly are those types of zones? So the safe zone is essentially, you cannot in almost any conceivable way do anything to your opponent from this position besides moving around them and like just trying to make them turn. The safe zone is for after you do any type of boom, boom, boom clash, get away and you're catching your breath, trying to recover from a possible hit on you, or they might be trying to recover from a hit you did to them. This is where you can like kind of catch your breath, resettle anything, kind of shake something out, and then you reset to get close into your busy zone. Now, depending on certain abilities and stuff like that, you can be completely in a safe zone, right? Can't hit or immediately go into being able to hit them. And I know people want to say they would never be hit with that, but I've done it multiple times on people and it works. So the next zone after that is our busy zone. So the busy zone is essentially where we figured out where our personal fighting distance is, right? This is where we really need to start paying attention to what is open or what's closed, what targets are available, what our opponent is doing, what their positioning and all that is. This is where like a whole lot of thinking goes on, because all it takes is small steps, boom, and then we're rocking and rolling, right? This is where a majority of our kicks, like I said, like a basic front kick either touches or barely touches, but I turn into a thrust kick, and now all of a sudden I'm sinking a foot into their spine, right? Or I wind up taking a step in, boom, and doing some type of throw or takedown or anything like that. So this is one of the most dangerous type ones because every target's available, right? Because we got low kicks, boom. We got body kicks, boom. We got headshots, boom. Everything's available. The busy zone is one of the most dangerous zones, and that is from this barely touching or barely missing distance with a front kick. Next distance after that is our working zone. This means that we are close enough to where we can basically reach out and touch with a little bit of give maybe. Maybe we put in a little bit of lean, a little bit of twist or something, and we're sinking stuff into them now. This is pretty much all hand technique area or low kick or high kick territory. This is generally the distance that you want to be at for those. This is also really great areas for you to start getting in to go into clinch work or to go into takedowns or anything like that. This is the area to where you really have to start paying attention, because if you're not doing things to them, they should be doing things to you. And then we have the next area, which is our let's go zone, right? This is the one to where you're doing all your clinch work. This is where you can't really do fully extended attacks. So this is why you start doing, right, elbows or the knees here. It's like real close uppercuts, or coming in and doing your types of throws and all that stuff. Now, this is not nearly as dangerous, or some people think, some people don't, as our working zone. Why is that? It's because you can get close enough that you can start grabbing their arms or tangling up their legs or pinning their legs in order to not allow them to use those particular weapons while still having access to yours. But this is also where people who are really, really good at clinch work are really, really sensitive to what their opponent does, which will then allow them to get sweeps on them, get throws on them when their opponent makes a mistake or as soon as they make a mistake. So for clinch work, for you to be really, really good at it, You need to be very sensitive on what your opponent is doing without having to, oh, his feet are this way, I can, and then throw them down. You can't do that. Okay, you got to be able to feel your opponent, feel what they're doing, and if they shift their body, capitalize on it. So clinch work actually requires a very, very high level of skill to be very good at it, unless you're just stupidly stronger than they are and you just make them do what you want. But if you don't have that, or your physical abilities are kind of close to each other, that's where actual technical skill comes in. So again, our 4 zones is the safe zone, where you or your opponent can do almost anything and not be hit. Then we have the busy zone, where you really have to start paying attention and where almost all of your techniques can reach the other person, but theirs can almost reach you. Then we have the working zone, where you better be doing something or they're doing something to you. And then last, we have our let's go zone or clinch zone, where a high level of skill is actually required to be very, very good at it. So within your training, I highly suggest that you figure out what your own personal distance is and then see what techniques work from there. Some do, some don't. It might be particular size. You might be, if you switch feet, you might have a shorter push here versus the other side. And so you know which side you can kind of switch to for certain techniques, for certain distance. So if you wind up sparring or fighting people that are close to your same height, same length of limbs and all that stuff, if you can figure out how close you can be to a target in touch, you can kind of figure out how close your opponent should be. Now, here's the thing. When I do say that my distance from the target is 1 meter, what I mean by that, 1 meter from where the front of my foot is to where my target is. The target is usually the opponent's trunk, their torso and stuff like that. It is not where their foot is. It is not where their guard is, because some people might fight like this. This is much further away. So if it was 1 meter here, I'm here. I'm technically in a safe zone because I cannot reach. Now, can I do what I did at the beginning of the video? Yes, right there. Like, can I go from here and go in? Yes. Now, it is a big move, and unless you do something to completely take their mind away from you doing something like that, you still have to be able to have the correct power at the moment of impact. And for that type of big move, it's really hard to do that. Besides, you just wind up being something like, here's my weight and here's a battering ram, and then I'm just gonna hit you. That doesn't cause a whole lot of damage. It's still not comfortable, but that versus me being proper distance, right? And me just sinking a foot into them really quick versus just, man. For me, when I hit people, I don't want them to go away. I want them to fold. And one of the things that helps with that is knowing my proper distance for that particular technique. We have these 4 distances, but how do we change or go to each of these distances? Well, lucky for you, I've technically already done videos about that. It is my 3 steps of going forward and backwards. A very quick recap. Please go see the videos for more details. Very, very quick recap though is you have a push, boom. You have a step, boom. Or you have a step up or cross step, however you want to put it. The cross step video goes into more detail because there is some nuance type stuff, especially depending on what your combat sport or whatever you're doing. If you have an initial different distance, like for some styles, they're here, they're actually quite close. They can take their front leg and touch here, and you like being able to hit with the shin. A very simple, small step here is kind of all you need. If you have a bigger stance and stuff like that and you're further away, then I might have to take a slightly bigger step. Or if the person is running away from me, I will have to take an even bigger one. So go watch those videos for a little bit more in-depth things. I do go over a little bit more. But in the next video on the 5 principles of fighting, we'll be going over footwork, and I will show some basic footwork drills and why they are important versus some other footwork drills you might see and not understand the purpose for. I'm Matic, and I'll catch y'all later.